The last thing I expected to feel at my own sister's birthday dinner was invisible. But there I was, sitting at the end of a long table covered in flower arrangements and half-empty wine glasses, watching my brother-in-law whisper something into my sister's ear that made her laugh so hard she had to cover her mouth. Across from me, my cousin and her husband were arguing over who had given the better toast. Even the couple I didn't recognize, some friends of my sister's from her book club, were leaning into each other like they were magnets, and the whole restaurant was made of metal. I was 42 years old. I was a registered nurse with 17 years of experience, a woman who could start an IV in the dark and stay calm when everything else was falling apart. I owned a 2-bedroom condo on the 3rd floor of a building I loved, with good light and a balcony where I grew tomatoes in the summer. I had a savings account, a reliable car, and friends who actually showed up when I needed them. And I was eating bread rolls alone at the end of the table because there was no one sitting next to me. My sister noticed. She always notices. After the cake was cut and the dinner wound down, she found me near the coat check, scrolling through nothing on my phone. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just put her arm around me and said, "Monica, you deserve someone who's crazy about you." That's all I'm going to say. I told her I was fine. I always told everyone I was fine. The thing is, I had been fine. After my last relationship ended 3 years ago, a slow unraveling over 6 months that neither of us had the courage to stop, I had rebuilt my life carefully. I worked. I cooked real dinners for myself. I signed up for a pottery class I was genuinely bad at and loved anyway. I wasn't sitting around waiting to be rescued. But sitting alone at that table, watching everyone else exist in pairs like it was the most natural thing in the world, I felt something I didn't want to name. I downloaded a dating app 2 days later. His name was Derek. He messaged me first, which was unusual because I'd been on the app for a week and most of what I'd received was barely legible. His message was different, thoughtful, a little funny, referencing something specific from my profile about hiking trails I liked near the city. We texted for 4 days before he asked if I wanted to get coffee. He was 46, broad-shouldered, with a calm way of speaking, like he'd thought about what he wanted to say before he said it. He worked in logistics consulting. He explained contract work, which meant his schedule shifted, some months busy, others quieter. He had a teenage son, Tyler, who was 15 and lived with his ex-wife during the week. He had him every other weekend. His marriage had ended 2 years ago. He said it without bitterness, just the plain fact of it, and I respected that. We talked for 3 hours at that coffee shop. He asked about my job, about what it was actually like to work nights in a hospital, and he listened the way people listen when they're genuinely curious, not just waiting for their turn to speak. When we left, he walked me to my car and said, "I'd really like to do this again." I drove home smiling. The following weeks were easy in a way I hadn't expected. Derek texted good morning without being suffocating about it. He showed up to our second date with a coffee already in hand for me. He'd remembered how I took it from something I'd mentioned once, offhand, during our first conversation. He talked about Tyler with warmth, showed me a photo of the two of them at a baseball game last summer. His son looked like him around the eyes. "He's a good kid," Derek said. "Quiet sometimes. He went through a lot when his mom and I split, but he's doing better." By the 5th date, I knew I liked him more than I'd liked anyone in years. By the 8th, we were spending weekends together. By the 3rd month, he was staying over more nights than not. My friend Carla met him once, briefly, and texted me afterward. "He seems solid. Eyes are kind. I like him." That was enough for me. The conversation about moving in happened the way those conversations usually happen, gradually. Then, suddenly, Derek's lease was coming up. His landlord had raised the rent significantly, and he was already spending most of his time at my place. He brought it up one Sunday morning while we were making breakfast, casual, almost like he was thinking out loud. "It just makes sense," he said, leaning against the counter with his coffee. "I'm here all the time anyway, and Tyler can have the second bedroom when he visits. We could really make this work, Monica." I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because it matters. I felt hopeful. I felt the kind of warmth you feel when someone is choosing you, specifically you, out of all the options. I was 42 years old and I had been alone for 3 years, and here was this man standing in my kitchen telling me he wanted to build something with me. "Okay," I said, Let's try it. He moved in 3 weeks later. 2 carloads of clothes, a guitar he barely played, a box of books, and a record player he was very attached to. I cleared out half the second bedroom closet and bought a new set of sheets for the guest bed in anticipation of Tyler's visits. I stocked the pantry with things Derek mentioned. He liked a specific brand of hot sauce, the good coffee beans, sourdough bread instead of the sandwich bread I usually bought. The first few weeks felt like playing house in the best possible way. We cooked dinner together, splitting the tasks. He was a surprisingly good cook, actually better than me, with anything involving a grill. We watched movies at night and argued companionably about which ones were worth finishing. He started the dishes sometimes without me asking. It felt like the beginning of something real. Then his schedule shifted. The consulting contract he'd been on wrapped up in early October. He said he had another lined up for November, that it was just a gap. I didn't ask too many questions because it didn't seem like my place. He was a grown man with professional experience, and he knew how to manage his own career. I wasn't his mother. But October stretched on, and the November contract got pushed to December. Derek was home during the days now, and then home during the evenings, and then home most of the time. He wasn't sitting idle exactly. He was on his laptop, he was on calls, he was working on proposals. But the income wasn't coming in, and I knew that because the bills were. I want to be clear. I never expected him to split things perfectly from day one. I understood that his finances were in a transitional moment. He paid child support $800 a month, which I knew came out automatically, and he had some savings, but they were clearly limited. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself it was a partnership, and partnerships have seasons. What I didn't expect was for him to never mention it. Not once did he say, "Hey, I know I'm not contributing right now, let me at least cover groceries this week." Not once did he say, "I'll get the electric bill this month." He ate the meals I made, drank the wine I bought, used the streaming services I paid for, and went to sleep at night apparently unbothered by any of it. Tyler started coming over every weekend, not every other weekend. His mom was dealing with something at work, Derek explained, so it was easier this way for a while. I didn't mind Tyler. He was actually a sweet kid once he warmed up quieter than his father. Into drawing, would sometimes sit at the kitchen table sketching while I prepped dinner and show me what he was working on. I liked him, I did. But 2 adults and a teenager eat differently than I do alone. The grocery bills went from my usual $140 a week to well over $200. I added it up one Thursday evening while Derek was watching something in the living room and Tyler was in the second bedroom. Just October alone, groceries up 60%, utilities noticeably higher, household supplies running out faster. I had also bought Tyler new drawing supplies, nothing extravagant, a decent sketchbook and some good markers because he'd mentioned his old ones had dried up. That was $40 I hadn't planned on. I closed my laptop and went into the living room. "Hey," I said, "can we talk about the household expenses for a minute?" Derek muted the TV. He looked at me with an expression that was almost patient. "Sure, what's up?" I explained it calmly. Not with accusations, just the numbers. The groceries, the utilities, the general increase in cost now that 3 people were living here most of the time. I said I wasn't asking for anything formal, just that it would help if he could contribute something while things were between contracts. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Monica, you know I'm in a tight spot right now. I've got child support coming out every month. I'm not just sitting here doing nothing, I'm actively working on getting the next contract." "I know," I said. "I'm not saying you're doing nothing. I'm just saying the expenses have gone up and I'm covering all of them." "You own this place," he said. "Your mortgage is your mortgage. I can't pay you for living here like some kind of tenant. That's not what I'm asking. I'm talking about groceries and utilities and—" "I hear you." He turned the volume back up, just a little, just enough to signal that the conversation was done. "Once this next contract comes in, we'll sort it out. You just need to be a little patient." I went back to the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and told myself he was right, that I just needed to be patient, that this was what it meant to be in a real relationship with a real person going through a real difficult stretch. I was a nurse. I knew what it meant to carry more than your share during hard times. That was what you did for people you loved. I carried it for another 6 weeks. By the time December arrived, the November contract had never materialized, and the December one was in final discussions. Derek had started having his friend Marcus over on Friday nights. Marcus was fine. I had nothing against Marcus, but Marcus ate dinner with us. Marcus drank beer from our fridge. Marcus stayed until 11 sometimes. And I was the one who had bought the beer and made the food and cleaned up after they both went to watch something loud in the living room while I did the dishes alone. One Friday, I came home from a 12-hour night shift to find 3 empty pizza boxes on the counter and the kitchen a mess. Derek was asleep. Marcus had presumably gone home. Tyler was in his room with headphones on. I stood in my kitchen at 7 in the morning in my work scrubs, looking at other people's pizza boxes, and I thought, how did this happen? I didn't say anything that day. I was too tired. I cleaned up, showered, and slept. But that night, I sat down with my laptop and a notebook, and I did what I should have done months earlier. I made a spreadsheet. I listed every expense from the past 3 months: groceries, utilities, household supplies, the drawing supplies for Tyler, the extra case of beer Derek had asked me to pick up just this once, and then once again, and then once more after that. I cross-referenced with my bank statements, which I keep meticulously because I am a woman who has always understood that clarity about money is not greed, it's survival. The total for 3 months came to roughly $11,000 above what I normally spent living alone. $11,000. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I did something that might seem strange, but it was the most honest thing I could think of. I opened a new document, and I started writing it out as a bill. Not in an angry way, not with ugly language, just clearly. 3 months of shared household expenses, broken down by category. My portion versus the increase attributable to additional occupants. A reasonable split, not even 50-50, just a proportional contribution based on the number of people in the household. I printed it out and left it on the kitchen counter before I left for my morning shift. I want to tell you I was brave and certain when I did it. The truth is my hands were a little shaky, but I did it. I came home that evening to Derek, sitting at the kitchen table with the printed page in front of him. His expression was harder to read than I expected, not angry yet, something more like disbelief. "What is this?" he asked. "It's a breakdown of the household expenses for the past 3 months," I said. I kept my voice even. Nurse voice, the one I use when I'm delivering information that's hard to hear. I put a lot of thought into it. I didn't ask for 50-50. I just calculated what a fair contribution would look like based on how many people are living here. He looked at the paper again. Then he set it down. "You made me a bill," he said, "like a landlord. Like a partner who's been carrying the full financial weight of this household for 3 months. He stood up from the table. Not aggressively, but with the energy of someone who has decided to reframe the conversation. "Monica, I told you I'm between contracts. You know my situation. I have child support. Do you have any idea how demoralizing it is to have your girlfriend hand you an invoice, like I'm a contractor, like this is a transaction? It became a transaction," I said quietly, "when I stopped being able to pay my own bills comfortably because I was covering yours. Your bills." He repeated it with a kind of flat disbelief. "Your bills." "Right, because nothing here is mine, is it? I'm just a guest." "You contribute nothing financially," I said. "What would you call it?" The conversation went sideways from there. He told me I was making him feel like he wasn't welcome in his own home. I noted that it was, in fact, my home. He told me I was being cold and transactional, that real relationships weren't about keeping score. I told him that one person keeping score was still better than one person keeping everything. He told me he'd thought I was different, that he hadn't expected this from me. "Expected what?" I asked. "For me to ask you to help pay for the food you eat?" He walked away from the counter. He said he needed some air. He went out to the balcony, and I stood in the kitchen listening to the sound of the refrigerator hum and tried to decide how I felt. What I felt was very, very tired. Not of the argument of everything that had led to it. Of months of telling myself to be patient, of cleaning up after 3 people while carrying a full nursing schedule, of watching the man I had believed in sit across from me and make me feel embarrassed for asking for basic fairness. He came back inside eventually. He said he wasn't in a place to have this conversation right now and that we'd talk in the morning. He went to bed. I stayed up, sitting at the kitchen table, the spreadsheet still open on my laptop. I called my friend Carla the next morning, early, before Derek was awake. He made you feel guilty for asking him to contribute? Her voice was quiet, but the tone underneath it was not quiet at all. He said I was being cold. Monica. A pause. I need you to hear me. That is a classic deflection. The moment you brought up something reasonable and fair, he made it about his feelings so you'd spend the rest of the conversation managing him instead of getting what you actually needed. I knew she was right. I had known it before I called her, actually. Sometimes you just need to hear someone else say it out loud. What do I do? You already know what to do, she said. You just want someone to tell you it's okay. It's okay, she told me. I gave it 2 more weeks. I want to be honest about that. I gave it 2 more weeks because I am someone who does not give up easily, and because I had real feelings for him, and because Tyler had started texting me pictures of his drawings, sometimes just spontaneously, with no message attached, just the drawing, and I didn't want to lose that either. But Derek didn't bring it up again. He acted as if the conversation had never happened. He was affectionate in the ways he could afford to be making me coffee in the morning, being physically present and warm, and the bills kept accumulating, and nothing changed. One evening he mentioned casually that Marcus was thinking of having the group over here on Saturday. A group, like my apartment was a standing venue. I said, very calmly, I don't think that works for me. He looked at me like I'd said something surprising. Why not? Because I wasn't consulted, and because I'm the one who lives here. We both live here. You live here, I said carefully. I pay to live here. Those are different things. He didn't speak to me for the rest of that evening. What happened next is the part I think about most now. I didn't make a scene. I didn't get dramatic. I sat down the following Saturday morning while he and Tyler were at a baseball game, and I made a list organized, specific, the way I organize anything important of what I needed from this relationship in order to continue it. I was not asking for the impossible. I was asking for a timeline, a real one, not when the contract comes in, a dollar amount, a plan, the things 2 adults discuss when they're genuinely building a life together. I put the list on the coffee table with a note that said, I'd like to talk through these when you get home. Not a fight, just a conversation. He came home, read it, and said he thought it was controlling. I asked him to explain what felt controlling about asking for a financial contribution timeline. He said he felt like he was being managed. I asked him whether he preferred I just continue absorbing all the expenses indefinitely without any discussion. He said he preferred I trust him. I said trust required some evidence of intention, and that evidence was what I was asking for. He said he didn't have to defend himself in his own home. I said, and I meant every word, this has never been your home. You've been a guest who stopped acting like one. He left that night. Not for good. He said he was going to Marcus's place to clear his head. He was gone for 2 days. When he came back, he was contrite in the specific way people are contrite when they've run out of other options. He said he'd been stressed and he'd taken it out on me. He said he appreciated everything I'd done, and he hadn't been showing that enough. I listened to all of it. I believed some of it. And then I asked him, quietly and directly, do you have a plan for when you'll be able to start contributing? He said he had a meeting on Thursday that looked very promising. I said, okay. I said we'd revisit after Thursday. Thursday came. I didn't ask. I waited to see if he would bring it up. He didn't. I waited until Sunday. I made dinner something I'd made 100 times, a chicken dish with roasted vegetables, nothing special. We ate. Tyler was there. Afterward, when Tyler had gone to his room and Derek was doing what he always did, settling onto the couch, reaching for the remote, I sat down across from him instead of clearing the dishes. How was Thursday? I asked. He knew what I was really asking. I could see it in the slight shift of his posture. It's looking good, he said, but they need another few weeks to. Derek, I interrupted him gently. I wasn't angry. I think that surprised him. I've thought about this a lot, and I think you're a good person who has gotten comfortable in a situation that isn't fair to me. I don't think you're malicious. I just think you got used to things being easy here and you stopped asking whether they were easy for me too. He was quiet. I need you to find another place to live, I said. I'm not ending the relationship right now. I'm not saying never. I'm saying not yet. But I need you out of this apartment until we're on equal footing. Until you have income, and you're contributing, and we're actually partners. I can't keep doing this." What followed was not dignified on his part, though I understand why, he argued. He said I was throwing him out over money. I said I was asking him to stand on his own feet, which was not the same thing. He said he had nowhere to go on short notice. I said he had Marcus and his ex-wife's spare room if he needed it, and that I was giving him 2 weeks. He said I didn't know what I was asking him to give up. I said I knew exactly what I was giving up. He called me selfish. He said I'd turned a real relationship into a financial transaction. He said he thought I was the kind of woman who understood that life had seasons and you supported people through the hard ones. I said I had been supporting him for 4 months, and he had called it partnership while doing none of the supporting. He packed 2 bags that night. Not all of his things. I told him he could come back for the rest on a day I wasn't home, and I'd leave a key with the building manager. He stood in the doorway with the bags and looked at me for a long moment. "You're going to regret this," he said. I didn't answer. He left. The door closed. The apartment went quiet. I stood in the hallway for a moment, and then I went into the kitchen, and I made myself tea, and I cried not because I thought I'd made the wrong decision, but because grief doesn't wait for the right moment. I had wanted this to work. I had wanted him to be who I thought he was at the beginning. I had wanted Tyler's drawings on my phone to mean I was becoming part of something real. I cried for about 20 minutes, and then I washed my face, and I felt, underneath all of it, something that surprised me. Relief. Clean and unmistakable. Carla came over the next evening with a bottle of good wine and a rotisserie chicken, and the specific kind of energy she reserves for moments when she knows the right response is just to be present. We sat at my kitchen table, and she let me talk through all of it without once saying, "I told you so," which is one of the reasons I've kept her in my life for 15 years. "Do you think I gave up too fast?" I asked at some point. "Monica," she said, "you gave him 4 months and a written list of reasonable requests. That's not fast. That's extraordinarily patient." It didn't feel patient. It felt like I was failing to communicate. "You communicated clearly," she said. "He heard you and decided not to change. Those are different things. You can't fix someone's decision not to show up." I knew she was right. I knew it even while the part of me that had wanted this to work was still arguing in the back of my mind. I heard from him once more, about 10 days later. A long text, written like an apology but structured like a negotiation he'd been reflecting. He said, and he could see how things had looked from my side, and he thought if we could just talk in person, he could show me that he was serious about making changes. He had a potential contract starting the following month. He missed me. He missed the apartment. Honestly, he phrased it differently, but that's what was underneath it. I read the text twice. Then I put my phone down and went back to the book I'd been reading. I didn't respond that night. In the morning, I typed out a short reply. "I appreciate you reaching out. I meant what I said. I'm not closing the door forever, but I need to see real change over time, not a conversation about potential change. When things are different, you can reach out again." He didn't reply after that. I don't know what that means, and I've stopped trying to figure it out. What I know is that my kitchen is mine again. The fridge holds exactly what I want in it, the blue cheese I like, the specific kind of yogurt, the good eggs from the farmer's market I'd stopped buying because someone else was always eating them before I got to them. My balcony still has the last of the fall tomatoes, going to seed now, but they're there. The second bedroom, the one I had cleared and remade for Tyler's visits, I've started thinking about turning into a proper reading room. Bookshelves on 2 walls, a good lamp, the small chair I saw at an estate sale that I'd been too practical to buy for myself. I'll buy the chair. I'm not going to tell you the ending of this is that I found perfect peace and stopped wanting companionship. That would be a cleaner story than the true one. Some nights I still feel the weight of it, the particular ache of having believed in something that turned out to be mostly convenient for someone else. I think about Tyler and his drawings, and I hope he's okay. Hope someone is paying attention to him in the ways that matter. But I also get home from 12-hour shifts now, and my kitchen is exactly how I left it. There are no strangers' pizza boxes on my counter. My savings account looks better than it has in 6 months. Last weekend, I signed up for a pottery class, a different one than the disastrous one I took 3 years ago, and on the first night, I made something that was genuinely, impressively lopsided, and I laughed out loud at it all the way home. I don't know what I've learned, exactly. Or maybe I do, and it's just hard to say clearly without it sounding like a bumper sticker. Something about the difference between loneliness that comes from being alone and loneliness that comes from being with someone who has made you invisible in your own life. Something about how patience is a virtue, right up until it becomes a way of avoiding a conversation you're afraid will confirm something you already know. Something about how 42 is not a deadline. I think about my sister's birthday dinner sometimes. The way I sat at the end of that table feeling like a footnote. I was so convinced that the answer was someone beside me. Anyone beside me. What I know now is that the woman at that table, the one eating bread rolls alone, was not in as bad a situation as she thought. She was just scared. And scared people make decisions that make sense in the moment and cost them later. I made mine. I paid for it. I got out. The reading room is going to be beautiful. If this story stayed with you, if you've been in a situation like this, or you're in one right now, and you needed to hear that asking for fairness is not the same as being cold, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, you know where the subscribe button is. I'll see you next time.